A sign came down from heaven, but not every heart bowed when it arrived. A table was sent from above, not touched by fire, not prepared by human hands, not earned by labor, but granted as a sign so clear that doubt should have died the moment it appeared. It was meant to calm restless hearts, deepen certainty, and leave no excuse after it. But not every soul becomes softer in the presence of proof. Some people can stand in front of miracles until miracles begin to feel ordinary. They can watch clay take the form of a bird, see the blind open their eyes, hear truth emerge from the mouth of an infant in the cradle, and still walk away unchanged. This is not only a story about provision from heaven. It is a story about what happens when signs surround a people, yet humility does not enter them. Before we go further, send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if stories rooted in the Quran strengthen your heart, take a moment to like, subscribe, and stay until the end, because this is not merely history. It is a warning that reaches across generations and asks what lives inside us when truth stands directly in front of our eyes. Long before the heavenly table descended, before the sky answered a request that would shake a nation, the earth had already been prepared by quieter miracles. It was an age marked by revelation, by mercy, and by the weight of divine signs. In that sacred time lived three noble prophets, whose stories touched one another like threads woven into one decree. Zachariah alayhis salam, Yahya alayhis salam, and Isa ibn Maryam alayhis salam. The table from heaven did not appear in a spiritual vacuum. It came after heart-shaking signs had already unfolded one after another, until disbelief could no longer hide behind claims of confusion. The first movement of this story did not begin with crowds. It did not begin in a marketplace, or in a public square, or before people hungry for spectacle. It began in quietness. It began with an old prophet whose bones had weakened, whose hair had turned white, whose years had reached a point where ordinary people stop expecting new beginnings. Zachariah alayhi salam had carried age in his body and longing in his chest. His wife had long been barren. By the measure of worldly causes, the matter seemed finished. But prophets understand what most people forget. When human means disappear, the power of Allah remains untouched. So Zachariah did what the righteous do when every earthly door appears closed. He turned away from noise and spoke privately to his Lord. He did not complain before people. He did not perform his grief for an audience. He whispered a dua filled with humility, dependence, and hope that had not died even under the weight of years. He did not ask for status. He did not ask for comfort. He asked for a righteous heir, someone who would carry truth after him and remain pleasing to Allah. That is the beauty of prophetic longing. Even personal desire becomes tied to service of revelation. Then heaven answered. The response did not come as vague comfort. It came as a promise. Allah gave him glad tidings of a son, a child whose name was chosen before birth by divine will, Yahya alayhis salam. Imagine the trembling wonder of that moment. An old prophet, physically weakened, listening as the impossible is announced as something already decreed. When he wondered how such a thing could happen in old age while his wife had been barren, the answer returned him to the foundation all hearts must learn. This is easy for Allah. The one who brings creation from nothing is never constrained by the limits that govern human beings. Then came a sign attached to the miracle. Zachariah alayhis salam was told that for days he would not speak to people while remaining physically sound. Silence itself became part of the lesson. It was as if the world was commanded to quiet down so the soul could hear more carefully what mercy feels like when it descends. When he emerged to his people, he could only gesture to them to glorify Allah morning and evening. Even before Yahya was born, that generation was already being taught something essential. When divine mercy comes, the right response is gratitude, awe, remembrance, and surrender. Then Yahya alayhis salam entered the world, and the Quran presents him with unusual honor. He was not described as a child who would one day become righteous after a long struggle of years. He was marked early. Allah granted him wisdom while still a boy. He was given tenderness, purity, piety, and devotion to his parents. He was not arrogant. He was not rebellious. In an age when hearts were hardening, here stood a child defined by inward cleanliness and nearness to Allah. So before Isa alayhis salam stood before the crowds, heaven had already spoken through an old man's whispered dua. A barren womb made fruitful, And a child granted wisdom before most children understand the weight of life. The sky had already begun sending messages, and it was not finished. Then came Maryam alayhis salam, pure, devoted, honored, and tested in a way few souls could bear. She returned to her people carrying a child in her arms, and the atmosphere changed the moment they saw her. This was not the kind of return that draws smiles and welcome. This was the return of a woman immediately surrounded by suspicion. They knew her purity. They knew her worship. They knew the righteousness of her family. And that is what made the accusation so painful. The very qualities that should have protected her became, in that moment, the background against which people judged her more harshly. The Quran preserves the intensity of that scene. She came carrying an infant while eyes burned with shock, accusation, and suspicion. It was a moment of isolation so severe that language itself would have broken beneath it if Allah had not supported her. Yet Maryam did not panic. She did not collapse into frantic self-defense. By Allah's command, she remained silent. And then she did something astonishing. She pointed to the child. Their response came immediately. How could they speak to one in the cradle? A mere infant. And then the miracle tore through the moment before slander could settle any deeper. Isa alayhis salam spoke. His first public words did not create confusion. They destroyed it. He said, in meaning, that he was the servant of Allah, that Allah had given him the book and made him a prophet, that beginning matters more than many people realize. The miracle was overwhelming. Yes, but the first sentence established the truth that would protect the entire story from distortion. He did not begin with any claim that leaves room for divinity. He began with servitude. He began with ubudiyah. He began exactly where truth must begin, with his place before Allah. That moment was mercy for Maryam. It was honor descending from heaven at the exact point when accusation seemed ready to crush her. It was proof given not to entertain a crowd, but to defend a righteous woman with a sign no one present could deny. The Quran honors Isa alayhis salam with miraculous birth, purity of lineage, and signs unlike those given to most creation. But it never removes him from the station of servant and messenger. This is why the speech in the cradle remains so important. It proves prophethood. It proves honor. It proves miracle. But it also protects Tawhid. The miracle is immense, yet the station remains clear. Then the public signs of Isa alayhi salam began to unfold with increasing force. They were not random wonders scattered across a restless society. They came as targeted blows against arrogance. Bani Israel had reached a point where many among them treated revelation with resistance and spiritual pride. If something could not be contained within what they already accepted, many were ready to dismiss it. So Allah sent Isa alayhis salam with signs so clear that excuses should have collapsed on contact. He formed from clay the shape of a bird. Then by Allah's leave it became alive and flew. Pause and think about that image. Clay in a prophet's hands. A form shaped before human eyes. Then breath. Then movement. Then flight. Yet the Quran itself protects the Aqidah of the believer in the very narration of the miracle. It does not present independent power. It does not leave room for confusion. It anchors the event with the phrase by Allah's leave. The wonder is real. The sign is undeniable. But the source of power belongs to Allah alone. Then came healing. The blind regained sight by Allah's leave. The leper was restored by Allah's leave. These were not illusions that could be dismissed through clever speech. They were afflictions that exposed the limits of human ability. Eyes that did not see began to see. Diseased flesh was restored. And still, the harder many eyes were struck by evidence, the more stubborn some hearts became. That is one of the most frightening lessons in sacred history. The eye can witness what the heart refuses to accept. Then came signs that entered private homes without crossing the threshold. Isa alayhi salam informed people of what they had eaten and what they had stored in their houses. Meals hidden from public view became proof. Private spaces turned into evidence. Secrets became witnesses, and still there were those who refused to yield. Then came the sign that should have shattered denial entirely. The dead were brought forth by Allah's leave. The Quran again keeps the center firm. It was not independent power. It was not divinity. It was by Allah's leave. Every miracle on the hands of Isa alayhis salam was both astonishing and carefully framed so that the listener would feel awe without ever violating Tawhid. Wave after wave, proof after proof, mercy after mercy. The age was overflowing with signs. Clay became living movement. Blindness became sight. Disease became health. Hidden things became known. Death itself was reversed by Allah's permission. What excuse should have remained after that? But signs do not force humility into a rebellious soul. They expose what already lives there. Yet not everyone rejected him. Among the crowds there were hearts that recognized the truth when it stood before them. There were souls who saw in Isa alayhis salam the purity of a prophet, the mercy of a true messenger, and the unmistakable signs of divine support. These believers were later remembered as the Hawariyun, the disciples, the companions who answered the call when others stood back in suspicion. They were not perfect beings beyond fear. They were believing men living in an age of immense proof and immense pressure. Their presence matters deeply, because the story of the heavenly table does not begin with open enemies. It begins with followers. When rejection spread among many of his people, Isa alayhis salam asked a question that revealed the nature of true allegiance. He did not ask who would defend his personal status. He did not ask who would protect his reputation as a man. He asked, "Who are my helpers for Allah?" In that question lies the difference between prophetic leadership and worldly ambition. The issue was never ego. It was support for truth in the path of Allah. The disciples responded with clarity. They declared that they were the helpers of Allah, that they believed, and that witness should be borne that they were Muslims, people in submission. In a time of denial, they answered with surrender. And this is where the tension of the story begins to deepen. Because even believers can experience moments of human weakness. Even a heart that believes can still long for reassurance. Even those who have seen miracles may still desire a sign that enters not only the mind but the body. Something seen with the eye, touched with the hand, tasted with the mouth. That is why the next request is so delicate and so spiritually dangerous. The disciples said, in meaning, "O Isa, son of Maryam, can your Lord send down to us a table from heaven?" The question has been discussed by scholars, and the safest way to understand it is through the prophetic response that followed. This was not mockery like the mockery of enemies. It was a request emerging from believing men who wanted their hearts strengthened and wished to witness a sign that would become certainty upon certainty. Yet sincerity alone does not remove the danger from a request like that. There are moments when asking heaven for more proof becomes a burden, because if the answer comes, accountability becomes heavier. Isa alayhis salam did not answer casually. He did not smile and turn it into spectacle. He warned them first. Fear Allah if you are truly believers. That answer contains immense wisdom. It is as if he was teaching them not to make demands upon the unseen lightly. A miracle is never merely a gift. Sometimes it is also a test. Sometimes it descends as mercy, but at the same time becomes proof so clear that whoever turns away afterward has nothing left to hide behind. The request of the disciples was sincere, but sincerity does not erase the seriousness of what they were asking. They then clarified their longing. They wanted to eat from it. They wanted their hearts to be reassured. They wanted to know more deeply that he had spoken the truth. They wanted to be witnesses to it. Human weakness had spoken, but not necessarily hypocrisy. This is part of what makes the story so powerful. Not every dangerous request is born from rebellion at the beginning. Sometimes it begins with a trembling heart seeking more certainty than has already been generously given. Then Isa alayhis salam turned away from people and raised the matter to Allah. Here the atmosphere changes completely. Until this point, miracles had occurred upon the earth through his hands by Allah's permission. Now the request was for something to descend from above, something not emerging from clay, flesh, illness, or the visible patterns of life around them, but from the heavens themselves. So he made the dua the Quran preserves forever. He asked Allah, their Lord, to send down to them a table from heaven, that it might be for the first of them and the last of them a festival, an occasion of joy, gratitude, remembrance, and a sign from Allah. Then he ended the supplication where all true dependence ends. Provide for us, for you are the best of providers. There is beauty in every part of that prayer. He did not ask only for food. He asked that it become an Eid, a sacred occasion carrying meaning beyond appetite. He asked that it be a sign, not a spectacle. He asked that it nourish both body and certainty. He asked with adab, with servitude, with recognition that all provision belongs to Allah. It was not the dua of a performer. It was the dua of a prophet carrying the weakness of believers to the Lord, who alone can answer. And then the answer came. Allah said that He would send it down to them. But the answer did not end with promise. It came with a warning so severe that the heart trembles when hearing it. Whoever disbelieved afterward among them would be punished with a punishment unlike that given to anyone among the worlds. This is the thunder inside the story. Yes, the table would descend. Yes, heaven would answer. But the descent would come tied to an immense covenant. Once such a sign arrives, excuses die. Doubt loses its shelter. Rejection after that is no longer simple confusion. It becomes rebellion after certainty. This is why the story of the table from heaven is not a soft tale about supernatural food. It is one of the most serious moments in the Quranic narrative of signs. The table was mercy. Yes. It was provision. Yes. It was honor. Yes. But it was also judgment upon the soul that could see, know, and still refuse. The Quran confirms the prayer, the acceptance, the descent, and the terrifying warning. As for many vivid details people often ask about, such as the exact appearance of the table, the kinds of food upon it, how large it was, or precisely how often it descended, those details are found mainly in later reports within tafsir material, and not with the same certainty as the Quran. That distinction matters. Revelation preserved what the heart most needs. The sign came, the warning came. Accountability became immense. Then it descended. That is certain. The table from heaven was not a symbolic legend invented by storytellers. It was a real sign sent in response to the dua of Isa alayhi salam and confirmed in the Book of Allah. A table came down from the sky. The earth received what heaven sent. Believers witnessed provision that no human hand had prepared. The question that follows is not whether it happened. The question is what happened inside the hearts of those who saw it. Many later narrations mention details. Some describe food upon it. Some say people ate from it and were nourished. Some suggest it descended more than once. Some reports say disobedience later returned among some who had witnessed the sign. Other stories mention betrayal, concealment, or consequences that followed. These reports appear in classical works and form part of the inherited storytelling tradition of Muslim scholarship, but they must be handled honestly. They are later narrations, not always established with the same force as the Quran, and perhaps the wisdom in that is profound. Allah did not preserve every visual detail people are curious about. He preserved the warning. The human soul often chases imagery and misses moral terror. People want to know the color of the table, the arrangement of the food, the number of those present, the exact sequence after the descent. But the Quran directs the listener somewhere deeper. What mattered most was not the decoration of the miracle. It was the exposure of the heart. A sign from heaven had come. If anyone disbelieved after that, punishment unlike others would follow. That is where the weight sits. Not on appetite, not on spectacle, on accountability. And here the story stops being about them alone and begins speaking to us. Think about the chain of mercy that had already surrounded that generation. Zachariah alayhi salam whispered in old age and received an impossible answer. Yahya alayhi salam was granted wisdom and purity in childhood. Maryam alayhi salam was defended by heaven itself when accusation closed around her. Isa alayhi salam spoke in the cradle, shaped clay into a bird by Allah's leave, healed the blind and the leper by Allah's leave, revealed what people had hidden in their homes, and brought the dead forth by Allah's leave. Then the heavenly table descended. How much proof does a people need before humility enters them? How much mercy must fall before surrender rises? And yet even after so much, some still turned away. That is the wound inside the story. The issue was never a shortage of evidence. The issue was the condition of the heart receiving it. When a soul is sick with arrogance, signs do not always soften it. Sometimes they irritate it. Sometimes they become things to explain away. Sometimes the presence of proof only increases resistance because surrender would require the ego to die. This is why miracles alone do not guide everyone. Guidance is not just a matter of what the eye sees. It is also a matter of whether the heart is willing to bow. Some people ask for signs as if signs themselves are salvation. But the Quranic stories teach otherwise. Pharaoh saw signs. Entire nations saw signs. Bani Israel saw signs layered upon signs. But awe without humility does not save. Exposure to miracles does not automatically purify. The arrogant person can stand in a room flooded with proof and still search for a path to denial. Because what he truly rejects is not evidence. What he rejects is submission. That is why this story is so frightening for every generation, especially one drowning in information, arguments, reminders, warnings, and evidence from every side. Many people say they would believe more deeply if only they saw something undeniable. But would they? Or would the ego simply demand one more sign after that, then one more after that, until the real problem is exposed? The problem is not always that truth is hidden. Sometimes truth is clear and the heart is busy protecting its idols, its pride, its habits, its image, its authority, or its attachment to a life that would have to change if it truly submitted. The heavenly table teaches that there comes a point when more proof is not mercy for the arrogant. It is testimony against them. The descent of the table was beautiful, but it was also terrifying, because it meant heaven had answered beyond what should have been necessary. After that, disbelief was no longer a fog. It was rebellion in daylight. And how many people today live around signs they no longer feel? Not necessarily signs like a table descending from the sky, but signs written across revelation, across life, across the self, across death, across answered du'as, across warnings narrowly escaped, across the rise and fall of hearts. How many people hear Quran recited and feel almost nothing because familiarity has stripped awe from the moment? How many witness mercy after mercy and still treat obedience like an optional inconvenience? How many say they want clarity while living in deliberate distance from the very truth they already possess? This is what makes the story timeless. It does not exist to satisfy curiosity about ancient wonders. It exists to ask a terrifying question. If truth stood before you with enough clarity to remove every excuse, what inside you would respond? Submission or self-protection? Humility or resistance? Gratitude or entitlement? Fear of Allah or fear of losing control over your own desires? The deepest tragedy in the story was not hunger. It was hardness. The real famine was not lack of food. It was lack of surrender in hearts that had already seen more than enough. A table descended from heaven, but for some, even heaven itself did not penetrate the barrier inside them. That is among the heaviest warnings a believer can hear. A sign can be overwhelming and still fail to guide the one who worships his own ego. So when you hear this story, do not let your mind rest only on what came down from the sky. Ask what should rise inside the chest when it is heard. Ask whether repeated reminders have made you softer or merely more familiar. Ask whether your heart still trembles when Allah speaks, or whether exposure without reflection has begun to make sacred things feel routine. The greatest danger is not always open disbelief. Sometimes it is becoming so used to the language of truth that truth no longer disturbs, humbles, or transforms you. The story of the heavenly table is built on the Quran, and the Quran does not narrate it for entertainment. It is a mirror. It is a warning. It is a mercy for the one who still wants to be shaken awake. It tells us that miracles are not toys for the curious and not decorations for religious storytelling. They are proofs. They are responsibilities. They are gifts that can become witnesses either for a person or against him. Zachariah teaches us that impossible doors remain open before Allah. Yahya teaches us that purity and wisdom are gifts Allah can place in a soul long before the world expects greatness from it. Maryam teaches us that Allah can defend the truthful in ways no human strategy could ever achieve. Isa teaches us that the mightiest miracles do not remove servitude. They deepen it. And the heavenly table teaches that when heaven answers beyond measure, the heart must answer with humility, gratitude, and fear of falling after clarity. Because in the end, the most frightening possibility is not that Allah withholds signs. It is that signs arrive, and a person remains unchanged. This is why the righteous never merely asked for wonders. They asked for steadfastness. They asked for hearts that could carry truth without betraying it. They asked for guidance that enters deeper than the eye. A miracle can seize attention for a moment, but only humility can make a sign fruitful. Only taqwa can protect a soul once proof has come. Only surrender can turn witnessing into salvation. So let the story remain where the Quran leaves its greatest weight. Not on the shape of the table, not on the number of those who ate, not on the color of what was sent, but on the warning that followed. Whoever disbelieves after that, whoever turns away after clarity, whoever sees and still rebels, That is the place where the soul should tremble. And perhaps that is why the story continues to echo with such force. We were not there when the table descended, but we know what it means to stand before truth and feel the battle between surrender and pride. We know what it means to receive reminders and decide whether to soften or resist. We know what it means to ask for guidance while still negotiating with our desires. The distance between their test and ours is smaller than it looks. The forms differ, but the heart remains the battlefield. A table descended from heaven. A nation was warned. Some believed more deeply, some did not. And the lesson remains alive until the final generation. Proof does not save the arrogant. Miracles do not rescue the proud. What saves is a heart humble enough to bow when Allah makes the truth clear. May Allah protect us from seeing signs without taking heed, from hearing truth without responding, and from becoming people for whom reminders grow familiar while the heart grows cold. May He give us the humility to benefit from every ayah He places before us. In revelation, in history, in the world, and within our own souls. And may He make us among those who do not wait for heaven to split open before they finally surrender to the Lord of Heaven. Until next time, may Allah keep your heart alive, your faith sincere, and your steps firm upon the truth.